My name is Randy Rubenstein, and welcome to the Mastermind Parenting Podcast. At Mastermind Parenting, we're on a mission to support strong-willed kids and the families that love them.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode. I have Shawn with me. Shawn is one of my masterminders. She's been on the podcast before. She also happens to be a psychologist. Her new handle on all the socials and her podcast is The Innovative Therapist.
Yeah, well, I haven't changed any of except the podcast. But yes, The Innovative Therapist is the podcast and Psychology of Wellness is the rest of the handles.
You got it. Are you going to change? Is Innovative Therapist going to be a thing, or are you not going to change everything else?
I might change. I don't know. Changing Instagram's harder, but not that I have that much of a social media presence, so it doesn't. But yes, it's changing over for sure. Yeah.
So we're here because Shawn's been up to a bunch of cool things, and so she's in my mastermind, which means she's one of my private clients, and also Shawn has been shifting and changing things in the way that she works with her clients. And now this is going to sound a little bit like a clusterfuck, but Shawn has been learning about this type of therapy called IFS, Internal Family Systems. I've talked about it on the podcast. Some people refer to it as part psychology. That's kind of, shorthand, I would say. And I started learning about IFS a while back. And I don't know if you came to IFS through me talking about it or other people.
You're how I heard about it.
Yeah. So I started learning about it just like I learn about things and started talking about it. And there was a book that I read called No Bad Parts. And then Shawn read the book. And then Shawn decided to sort of host a program / book club. And I was like, well, I want to sign up for that. Can I be now a participant? So Shawn and I have been in this relationship where sometimes I'm the pack leader and sometimes she's the pack leader. And now I wanted her to come here and so we can talk about all the things.
Yeah, it's going to be so fun. You've been such a huge part of why I'm doing what I'm doing today. So let's talk about it all.
Well, and I think that our relationship is such a great example of power with versus power over, right? Like when we come together and we do any kind of experience or healing experience or any of this sort of self-helpy work, personal development work, I think quite often it's this power over dynamic, which means like there's this person who is the guru, who's the very clear pack leader, but more than a pack leader, it's like they're sort of like the sage on the stage. They're telling you all the things. And then
the expert.
Right. The
all-knowing
expert, right. The all-knowing expert. And then the all-knowing expert has all of these disciples, and all of these disciples are constantly saying, oh, Dr. So-and-so, doctor, I think a good clear indicator of these people is like they go by doctor and their first name, or I'm not going to name names, and you have all the answers, if only. And over the years I had people say this to me, if only I could just get all your words in my head. And I'm like, well, really, I want you to have all your words in your head, right?
Yeah.
And way back when it was, my website was randyrubenstein.com. And I think I just had a knowing to change it to something like Mastermind Parenting, because I think I knew I don't want to be in a power over dynamic. I want to be in a power with, because I don't live in your homes. Like if I'm helping, especially moms, to step into more pack leadership in their lives, in their families, if they're dependent on me to be the all-knowing person, well, I'm not going to be there next to you when your kid's, having a meltdown and refusing to go to bed. So
right.
like we gotta build your pack leadership muscles up. And so we need to be in a power with dynamic. And I think that's very much the case for me and you.
Definitely. I would agree. And I think you watching you work, watching how helpful you've been to me prompted a bunch of things in my life, but I mean, there's something about the way that you work with us in your program that is always been very power with, because you do a lot of what I felt like I couldn't do as a therapist, of like sharing your own stories, and that's really helpful to all of us, right? Like it's very normalizing, it's very like destigmatizing, de-shaming. There's so much shame, and so I think there's been so much of watching you work and be so effective that's continued me along a path that, yes, I was on. I never liked diagnoses. There was a lot of things about therapy that didn't sit well with me that I've learned in my profession, but I don't know. Something about it. And I was also delving into like the online coaching world. But yeah, there's something about the way that I watched you work that has propelled me along to be like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to take all this stuff I learned with me. And that's like kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, for everyone listening, Shawn, talk about, I mean, you were trained as a clinical psychologist
Mm-hmm.
and went through all the mainstream measures that you needed to go through. And so really trained in this traditional format.
Yes.
Um, and, and I kind of want you to talk, because I kind of want you to lift the veil, like as you move into being this innovative therapist, right? Which is, I don't know if you would agree or not with this, but it's a little bit of an act of rebellion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I was trained as a clinical psychologist. I got my PhD in clinical psychology. And I mean, I also was planning to go into research, and the research world is very different than the clinical world. And so I was on the extreme of sort of learning a lot of very evidence-based approaches. And there was already like a disconnect between the research world and the clinicians, because the clinicians are like, this that doesn't work for real people. People don't improve their depression in 12 sessions only. People are not, they don't fit your mold, right? And so yeah, I do a lot of things very differently. You know, I feel like I want to express gratitude for my experience, because I was able to like see that world and understand that world. And I still love research in some ways, because I love trying to determine truth, but there's a lot about research that doesn't determine truth. And yeah, so I went to grad school thinking I was going to write NIH grants, and I do something very different than that now. And even I just completed my first 4 days of the internal family systems level 1 training. And there was just so many of the people in there were master's level therapists. There was some non-therapists. Some of them were pretty like newbie therapists, and I was just like, gosh, I wish I would have known about IFS when I was a newbie therapist. But I also really do value my experiences, because I think it gives me a unique perspective and understanding on, I don't know, it's an interesting world. I
Well,
mean,
I look,
yeah.
um, I think that, I mean, I'm a big proponent of therapy. I'm just also a big proponent of progress and
Hmm.
innovation and evolution. And so I think that the therapeutic world has needed a little bit of an overhaul for a while. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've known over the years who are in therapy for, like, spending lots of money, like so much time, so much money, and 10 years later they're still living in the same patterns. Maybe the players have
Yeah.
shifted a little bit. And so I'm like, okay, I I understand that there can be a benefit going to therapy and, helping you to be able to express yourself and get things out and feel like you're in a safe space to be listened to. And also, like, at some point, aren't if people are in pain and they're living in patterns that really aren't the life that they ever imagined for themselves, at some point, like, don't we want to facilitate more healing? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um
Well, and I'll say too that the world I was in, wouldn't have liked the long-term therapy. They would have been like, that's ridiculous. Like, we need to be doing CBT for X amount of weeks. And then there's this other world also that I haven't been in as actively. That's like that longer term model. Yeah, it's very interesting because we have to step back and look at like, where are we not helping people? Where are we telling them this is what you have to do? Sometimes things just take long, and sometimes that's true, but I think there's always more growth that can be happening, but we have to be able to look at ourselves, and that's not necessarily something, many of our systems are not set up to look at ourselves well. They're like, this is the way. I always think of the Mandalorian, like, this is the way. This is how we do things. And yeah, I mean, there's still parts of me that are like, I feel really good about where I'm at, but there's still parts that get worried, like, what will people think? What will my old colleagues think? And
Right.
but I also came from a program that therapy was pretty stigmatized. Going and doing your own work was, I like got caught going to counseling in my grad school. Like, someone ran into me, right? They're like, "Oh, what are you doing over here?" And I was like, "Oh, nothing. I'm going to therapy." I said I was going to therapy, and then they made this face like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry for asking." And I'm like, "Why?" Like, it resonated. And that's I would say not more common maybe in, I guess, research focused people and programs, but I also think when I came out of grad school, like, I during grad school listened to one podcast that was helpful to me in my eating journey, but podcasts were not really a thing. Like, there's been so much increased access to information and podcasts, and I don't know how that plays into it, but I think it increases our ability to innovate. And I believe if I was in grad school today, I would have found more innovative tools sooner. At least I think so.
I mean, isn't that interesting? Like, where it it was going to your own therapist was stigmatized when you're studying to be a therapist.
Right.
And um,
Well, I was supposed to
you
be a
know,
researcher, not a therapist, though. That's
right,
what
but
they
still
expected. But
you're
yes.
in the
But I'm still
you're
doing therapy with people. Yeah.
right, and you're in the field. And I think this can go for many different things where it's like, oh, we're we're the knowers of the things.
Hmm.
We're not the actual humans who also need support, right?
Yeah. Right.
Like
Very
I
power
think
over model.
very power over. I think it's kind of like parents who are like would never apologize to their kids when they screw up. It's
Right.
like if I admit that I had a human moment, then they won't respect me. They're going to bring it up. They're going to put it back in my face. I'm going to lose all my power.
Yeah. My
So never
credibility.
apologize, never admit. And if you look at that power over model, like even in that it even exists in our mental health professional world, I mean, it's pretty fucked up.
Yeah. Well, and it exists in more subtle ways. That's an extreme example, but it exists everywhere. And I know I mentioned to you, and I'm starting to talk about it on the podcast. I'm not too far in the book called Decolonizing Therapy, but it's really about looking at these systems of power and where they came from and getting curious about who's benefiting from them and just being like, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it really is validating some of the feelings that I've had in my body about the field, and being like, oh, yeah, I think I had some really good points about why diagnosis really never felt great to me. That's
Say
one.
more about that. Explain that to people who
Hmm.
yeah, don't speak that language necessarily. So like if you're
Hmm.
if you're a therapist and that sort of old model, non-innovative model, a person comes into your office and then now talk about this whole diagnostic. model.
Yeah, so as therapists, we're required to make diagnosis to do therapy. So I still diagnose because I have to. It's required by insurance, at least. If I guess for my self-pay people, it's not required. But yeah, it's this, I know, let me tell you, I know, and I'll just quickly say that diagnosis can have value for some people and it can be very helpful. So I'm not saying let's throw it out completely or that it doesn't offer any value, but it's this idea that like I know that what's going on, and yes, I can look at the DSM and we can look together, and that's a more collaborative way to see, do you meet this diagnosis? But for me as a clinician, it never felt like that helpful or relevant to the work that we were going to do, because I always, even though I didn't necessarily have the tools to do the deeper healing work, I'm like, I always want to dig to the deeper stuff anyway, and the diagnosis is more the symptoms and the surface, right? The branches. And I was always more interested in the root, which really doesn't have to do at all with the symptoms. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the root causes like the unhealed pain, the unhealed trauma, big or little t trauma, or just unaddressed pain is at the root of all of us, and it looks very similar for all of us at the root. And so diagnosis is all up in the branches and dividing us. And I've always been someone who sees, you know, someone with eating disorder symptoms and someone with OCD symptoms look very different, although those symptoms can overlap on the surface. But underneath, there can be so much similarity.
That's so interesting. And do you feel like that is what that ha, that has attracted you so much to IFS and part psychology?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of things that about IFS that just resonated. Yeah, IFS is so non-pathologizing. It helped me put language to things that I was already feeling. And yeah, it helps to look at like that part might pop up and protect you, and the eating disorder part perhaps, or there's usually more than one eating disorder part, but then the OCD part could pop up. And so yeah, I think that that's a main one. I only paused because I was like, I didn't seek out a lot of trauma informed training, whether I don't know exactly why. I think yeah. So I think there might be other things that could have addressed the root cause too, but I don't know, even those. I think IFS, from what I do know, I think IFS is like that next level of moving towards that non-pathologizing, and it's also moving towards empowering that person to be their own healer, which cognitive behavioral therapy says, I'm teaching you these skills so that then you can go be your own therapist on your own, but it's only teaching one set of skills that I personally never found that effective long term.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
change your thoughts sort of felt like whack-a-mole to me. I'm like, well, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
gonna have a bunch of other negative thoughts come up. So I think all what ultimately made me love IFS was my own experience with IFS and doing my
Mm-hmm.
own parts work, and after all the therapy I've done, achieving a much deeper level of peace and healing. And I'm still on that journey, but that's what convinced me, I think. And starting to
Well,
work with clients and seeing the benefit.
do you think that can you give just sort of like the overview of what is IFS? How would you describe it?
Yeah, so it's a model of psychotherapy, but really a paradigm for life where we understand ourselves as multi, not mono mind, but multiplicity of the mind means we have multiple parts of ourselves. And we have protective parts of ourselves, and there's different types of those. And then we have those always are protecting exiled parts of ourselves that are more vulnerable parts that had to be pushed down, that had to be pushed away for very good reason. And it's all about understanding our system with true compassion. And I think one of the biggest things for me and some of my friends, like therapists that have delved into this, is like I don't think I ever experienced true self-compassion until I started practicing IFS. It was always what I think of as cognitive self-compassion, of like, I appreciate myself, or good job, nice work. And I was always like frustrated because I'm like, I want to be self-compassionate, but my critic, which is a protector part of me, which is a manager part of me that's really invested in minimizing my contact with shame, it criticizes me so I can reduce shame in the future. Um, it wasn't willing to step back. So like when people would do all this self-compassion stuff, I'd be like, whatever. Don't have time for this. Like I like this in theory, but like, and that actually might be like my efficiency or doing part. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to check in, but
Does IFS help you to like cognitively? Yes, you can find the sentences in your head, and I think that can be helpful to sort of, lead you to, what am I like, maybe where does this come from, or what is this sentence, when have I said this before, when was this said to me? Like it's sort of like, it's like breadcrumbs along the path when you're kind of going, like it's almost like, I like to say, we're reading the stories of our lives, but we're we're going, we're going in reverse a little bit. Sometimes we're going in reverse and sometimes we're going ahead. And so those earlier chapters, they have disappearing ink, but if we find just the right magical breadcrumb, all of a sudden the ink, like we see the words pop up and we're like, oh, that's what happened. That
mm-hmm.
memory was always there. Like I was sharing before we started recording, that I had a moment yesterday where a root memory came back to me. And I was just talking about it with my husband this morning, and it was literally like, I think I was in about first grade, and I remember this night and this restaurant and what happened, and I remembered all the details. And I haven't thought of this memory. I don't, I don't think ever, maybe in my adult life, or not that I can recall. And I was talking with Scott today, and I was like, isn't it so interesting? Like all the memories are there in our brain and in our bodies, but we just can't recall them yet. And so I feel like the cognitive approaches, the therapeutic approaches that are helping us to look at our thoughts can help us. They're breadcrumbs, right? Can help us to like discover those breadcrumbs. But the thing is that we are feeling animals, like the feeling part of us overrides the thinking part. And so I'm interested in your thoughts on, does IFS help you to go into the feeling part of you, to pull out these old hurt parts, and now all of a sudden associate, oh, when this part shows up, this is where I feel it in my body, and this is what it
Mm-hmm.
feels like? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I would say, I mean, so exiled parts can be the most vulnerable ones that hold a lot of the pain, but our protective parts can hold a lot of feeling and pain too. And so I think to go back to, you can tell me if this makes sense, but like your tool and different tools like cognitive behavioral therapy will look at thinking patterns, distortions, right? Like I'm a failure, or that CBT would call it core beliefs. And sometimes your work is digging to those thoughts, right? The fest and the sentences of
Mm-hmm.
these like core beliefs. Like one mine that comes up so much is like, you failed. Like
Mm-hmm.
shame, shame. Like I was thinking like the Lord of the Rings, where it's like the bell. And it's like not Lord of the Rings. Anyway, some other show.
No,
So
but a lot of people, like there's some, I mean, most people have one that has to do with, I'm not enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not rich enough, I'm not enough of a good mom, whatever it is.
yep.
So yeah, so we have these core beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah. And so those, I think the way I understand it, and I can sort of speak to my system and how it's internalized it, and people's system can internalize these beliefs in different ways, but sometimes those thoughts are coming from a protector critic part, like I'm not enough, or like, gosh, you're such an idiot, you should have known this. Like, how did you mess this up again with your kid? Let's say, for example, or um,
Yeah, like
And
for
you
me,
can,
this will never work. This will never work. You never get chosen.
hmm
Like those,
hmm
those sentences in your head, which are like, I call them sentence soundtracks. They're sort of playing in the background. And even though we're not consciously hearing it, because it's playing, and where this really is so relevant, I think, to parenting is when that sentence is playing in the background, and now all of a sudden you've got your kid who is just, having just, they're like not having a good moment. They're freaking out about something ridiculous, really,
hmm
like something
yeah,
ridiculous, right? And if them freaking out about something ridiculous triggers one of these old soundtracks in your head, and then that causes you to feel the way that you felt every other time that you've thought that sentence. Now, all of a sudden, because we are feeling animals more than we are thinking animals, it overrides the thinking part. Well, then that's when we start talking, the triggered responses. We get activated. And even though we had all these plans to be, the gentle parent, to constantly talk about feelings and to empathize, and then we're like, we go into the shame and blame. And so then
yep,
we're like, damn it. And why do we do that? And it's like, because all of this stuff is happening below the surface. And I think it's really important to put some words and education behind understanding what's going on for you, so that you can start to step into more self-compassion, that it's not that you're a failure, or never going to get this, or you suck as a parent. It's that you're an actual human who has unhealed parts
yep,
just below the surface that get activated a lot by having
yep,
kids who live in their emotional brain. Okay, now
yeah.
continue with your thought. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No, no, it's good. I mean, I think that those situations identify or like activate usually protector parts, and the analogy that was used this weekend was like exile parts can often be balloons that you're trying to shove under the water, and they keep popping up. The more you try to shove them down, they keep popping up. And so sometimes in those moments, like I know this has happened to me as in parenting, like an exile part comes up and it's just like this feels so defeated and so just like I just want to go lay in my bed and give up. Like, and that's coming through. Probably that doesn't always mean like, again, parts can that's the thing about IFS. It's wonderful, but it's like, and there's some general rules of thumb, but I always just say like it depends for your system. But for me, I've identified that. And but then yeah, my critic will come in to myself like, are you, it's not, my critic is way less loud than it used to be. That's one of the gifts of IFS. Like it's, I get it now, and when it comes up I'm like, I know you're just trying to keep me safe. Like I really have built a relationship with that part of me in a very wonderful way. I'm sure there's still work to build that relationship, but yeah, it's a body reaction, and all of the perfect cognitive strategies. That's why I was frustrated with my field because it wasn't working enough for me, right? Like I was like, so many of us have, as you say, like really great left brain parts or left brain. Like there's a lot of our IFS calls them manager parts, and they're just like really invested in analyzing or doing or all of these things that help to keep us safe in the world. And they're great parts, and we have to actually slow down. That's the other thing I learned this weekend, really, in that training is like, I struggle with this a lot, but really slowing down and letting those really hurt parts know, like, I'll be back for you, but not rushing it, because our protective systems are incredible and they operate the way they do for a reason. And we really have to often slow down and appreciate them to do the healing work in a way that really, really feels good.
It's, I think that self-compassion part, right? Where it's like all change starts with awareness. So we have to, I think when we start to learn about these things and and get curious about, like, every time you're triggered, right? Like, I know nobody wants to look at the moments where you weren't you know, all those scripts that you've been memorizing, all those great tips by the, parenting guru that you're following, and you knew exactly what to say. And then the moment was here, and you started out saying it, but when your kid didn't respond because they were in their bodies, right? They were in their bodies and they were not responding. It wasn't fixing it. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
solving the problem. And then finally, your body starts to have a reaction and then you blow, right?
Yeah.
And I think where most people stall out is then they're like, they want to either delude and deny that happened. They may actually, I mean, I've heard this from several of the parents that I've worked with. They sort of dissociate, and when they go into that activated state afterwards, it's like they know that things went sideways between them and their kid, but they actually don't have any recall of exactly what they said.
I can
What
relate to
is
that.
that? Do you know what's happening there when you have, you lost your
Mm-hmm.
mind,
Mm-hmm.
and afterwards you can't remember any of the details? What is that?
Yeah, I would guess that that's a part of them disconnecting from some of the pain of what happened. I've
Mm-hmm.
had that happen even more mild moments, like meaning like I don't believe I like totally lost it, but I've been trying to relay a scenario to you and I'm like, I don't really remember because sometimes as much as I love being a mom and being a parent, like connecting with my kids is painful
Mm-hmm.
because they remind me of parts of myself that I'm not quite ready to look at yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like we can only go at the pace that our system is ready for. And so I think it would be a part that, yeah, dissociates to protect us, to keep us functioning well. I
Yeah,
believe dissociating parts are usually more firefighter. They're usually more like whoop. Firefighter parts come in to like, you know, squash out the flame of pain. So drinking, impulsive drinking, compulsive eating, shopping, numbing parts. But I think dissociation is usually one of those. It's less proactive and more reactive,
I had a
and we don't
lot.
have control over that.
I had a lot of that. I think those were my main firefighters. I also think it's interesting when you start to look at this parts work. And for anyone listening to this, um, start by listening or reading No Bad Parts.
Yeah.
I think that's a great book. Would you agree that that's a great
I
book to
love that
start with?
one because it has all the exercises so you can actually start practicing. Yeah, I
Yeah,
would
and
agree.
also be prepared that there is, some of it might be a little cringy,
Yeah,
and it's okay.
you
Just,
might have parts that are like, what on earth is this?
yeah,
And
like
that's fine. They're welcome.
this shit is crazy. Um, but
Right.
but when you start to learn about this, there's something like the shame starts to lift, even just from identifying, oh, I'm a human. Like, I'm not a robot. I'm not an alien. I'm a human, and this is what human beings do. We bury these hurt parts, and
Yeah.
we figure out coping strategies
Yep.
so that we can be functional people who, have
Yeah.
jobs and can feed ourselves and pay bills and have children and take care of children, and
Yep.
so we have these coping strategies. And, like, you know I think for me, my firefighter parts were a lot of dissociating and a lot of numbing strategies, which I felt tremendous shame over. And once I started to connect the dots of, well, I'm here and I'm doing pretty well and I've created
Mm-hmm.
a life for myself, and now I'm desiring more freedom. Like, I don't want to be imprisoned by addictive habits anymore. I want to learn how, like, I've had a, when I started like realizing I actually had a lifelong sense of loneliness ever since I was a child. And so I created different parts that made me feel less lonely, right? And so
Totally.
sometimes it was addictive habits and different things that I did that helped me to feel less lonely. And when I started to understand it and the shame started lifting, where it was like, oh, like now maybe I'm going to be grateful for these parts that because they got me where I am.
Totally.
And and I'm also ready to be free of these parts because I know they're getting in the way of me being able to truly connect with the people that I love. Like if I was always looking for a moment where I was going to be able to sneak away and go, have a cigarette. Well, I'm not in this moment right now enjoying the people that I'm with. I'm really just thinking in my mind, I'm looking forward. There was the dopamine that was coming from the wanting, the looking forward to getting away from these people to go do this behavior that ultimately was the behavior that helped me to feel less lonely because I now looked
Yep.
forward to this moment when I could go isolate. But I was ready to actually create a life that didn't feel lonely anymore, where I was connected to the people that I was with and in relationship with. And so I had to, reckon with releasing this habit that now I've got all these crazy dopamine receptors in my body that are saying, I don't want to release this habit. This habit is the thing that I look forward to,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah, and the one like thing that I'll add or tweak to that is like the language of I want to be free of these parts because what I'm learning is that parts hear that and they
mm,
afraid that we're getting rid of them and they will lose their importance to our system. And I actually thought that was really weird until I started to really listen to my system and my clients, and that is so true. That parts so we're not actually getting rid of any parts. We actually can't. We're just really appreciating them as you were doing and helping them to shift into even more useful roles. But we have to
that's
like,
such a good distinction. That's a great
yeah,
distinction.
it's
Yeah,
important
because you know what?
because, yeah,
Because I think getting it was like I want to be free of the old strategy that this part used to protect me. Maybe
right.
that's better
Yeah.
language, right?
Yep.
And right, I
Yeah, I
want to
want to
be
be
free
free of
of that,
smoking. Yeah. Or,
right?
yeah.
So that now, and I want to be free of feeling numb in my body.
Mm-hmm.
Like now it's
Mm-hmm.
like I want to actually be able to feel whatever I'm supposed to feel
Mm-hmm.
and to allow, even just yesterday with that memory coming back, as the memory came back, I'm like, this morning talking about it with Scott, and I'm like, it was almost like a baby looking at a discovery toy. Like I was fondling it a little bit in the sense of I was like, it's so cool. Like now I know why I had this trauma response a few weeks ago because
Mm-hmm.
the situation triggered this deep, deep, deep old wound that was buried in my body. And something about that situation triggered it. And now it came up, and now I can understand it and I can look at it. And
Yep.
I feel like it's it's out of my body, right? Like it
Yeah.
it feels so good to know. I'm like, oh, that needed to come up because I'm now in a life where I feel safe and I can release that now. I mean, that's how it's been for me. When I
Mm-hmm.
find those old memories come up and then starts working itself out. And then I can even, like, now I've named that. I like to name these parts. Like I have a no
Mm-hmm.
drama mama part. This
Mm-hmm.
now I'm calling my Gallagher Steakhouse part. And
Mm-hmm.
so, so something about it connects to the memory. And so then I can say to myself when I start to feel that feeling in my body, oh, this is just my Gallagher Steakhouse. Like, of
Mm-hmm.
course, this is
Yeah.
activating it. Right. And then it just sort of it's like it doesn't stay with me, it goes. I don't know.
Yeah,
What do
you're
you?
not fully getting rid of that part, but you're relating to it differently. You're
Mm-hmm.
naming it. And I think knowing you and I have the same part, the fact finder really benefits. And I think a lot of people benefit from naming parts or just naming it, just making sense of it all, right? But yeah, it's like, it's not necessarily going anywhere, but you're just attending to it differently. You're like, oh, I see you. It's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like it's it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous for anyone to think you are going to be the parent that you secretly wished you had, or you in your mind you set out to be, right? It is you're setting yourself up for failure if you don't understand that your kids are going to activate all of these unhealed parts in you. And
Yep.
unless you're ready to, and this is the thing, is that like you have amazing innovative therapists like Shawn out there who, who will do this type of work with you, or even just like starting to read the book. But like when you're starting to like look at these parts when you're activated and understand them and bring compassion, like that's why I think parenting is the ultimate personal development program, because if we allow ourselves, like we will be able to heal these old hurts that are living in our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I mean, I feel like I want to share one example that might be relevant here. It's not specifically relevant to parenting, but I think sometimes people can hear this, and I don't know if this is true or not for everyone listening, but like it's like we're getting to the pain and we're like almost like hunting for and healing exiled parts, which is a valuable part of the process. But what I'm learning more and more is there's so much healing that can be done in just connecting with your protector parts. And I think you've experienced this, and I know I have. And I've been studying and applying this model to myself for not quite 2 years, but I just went to this training and we just did a simple exercise with my little practice group. There was just two other people and the program assistant, and we were just interviewing manager parts. So I would basically, like, you would be, if you were the therapist, I would like embody one of my manager parts. So mine, I can't share anything else about the training except my experience, but my manager part that I actually kind of like is a part of me that's obsessed with efficiency and optimizing my experience in life. It's not just workaholism. It's like, I just want to have the most amazing experience. And when something gets in the way of that, this part of me gets pissed. And this happens with my kids. I'm like, I want to have an incredible day. So I guess it does relate to parenting. And this part gets so triggered when my kid wakes up and is like yelling at me in the morning, which has happened many times. And this part is just like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm trying to have this amazing, big, connected life that's so cool. And in probably 10 or 15 minutes of this new, relatively new therapist, new to IFS, she was just, I actually have the list right here. She was just interviewing my manager, and I was embodying the manager part. Like, I was like, let me tell you, I'm super important in Shawn's life, and I've done this for her. And when we went to Cedar Point, I helped her get to all the rides as fast as humanly possible so she could have the most amazing experience. And this part had so much to say. And I don't know, I just felt compelled to share that because there's so much healing. And I didn't go to any exile part at all. And I helped that part know. I learned it's super young. So managers to us usually feel like they're like have their clipboard and their to-do list and they're older, but they're super young. It learned in my childhood home to help me have the life I wanted, but I couldn't get with the connection level that I deeply desired. It was like, well, I'll figure out a way to get you an amazing life. And I updated it and I was like, look at the life we have now. And I'm actually getting a little emotional still because I'm like, look, we do have an amazing life. And it was like, oh, yeah, we do. And I've experienced that was 10 or 15-minute exercise and I feel so much like more free. And that part got triggered again because we were going to a basketball game and I couldn't get the tickets to download and I was so annoyed. I'm like, this is wasting my time. I don't have time for this. This is a stupid system. And I was able to connect with that part and be like, you're just trying to help me have an amazing life. Thank you. And then I delegated to my husband and he figured it out.
So good. I love that example. It's perfect.
Kind of makes it like more tangible, like, yeah. And it was connected to a part of me that yearned for more love and connection, but there's healing that happens in so many different levels with this model. And it's just cool.
Well, naming it, it's like you're bringing it out of your blind spot and then embodying it. And I mean, that role play sounds so cool because, and this is where I think, it's sort of like I've been doing more of that right brain metaphor coaching, which for those of us who are so left brainy, doing any kind of role play or right brained exercises, I like to say, where it's creative and, it's kind of like for anyone listening where it's like, what are you talking about? If you ever listen to a guided meditation where it's like you're in a field, what is it? Notice what it looks like. What's in the field, and so it walks you through this guided meditation and it kind of takes you into that dreamlike brain state. And that brings forth your right brain wisdom. And for those of us who have super bossy left brains, right?
I
Lots
used to
of
hate
managers.
those things.
Yeah, right. Hate. Me too. Hate Shavasana and yoga. Hate any of that. Like, no, I don't. I even to this day, I would say, like, I don't play. Like, I'm like, what? Going for a walk is not really play. And then I'm like, yeah, I don't know how to play. And then I'm like, wait, I play with my dogs on the floor all day and talk to them constantly like they're my dogs. I think I do know how to play, right? I've just been telling myself. So I think, just know anybody listening to this that's like, this is some hokey shit. We like, yes, it does feel because we all have these, really bossy left brains that have served us and we've accomplished things and we're, performing as adults. We're really good at doing all the adulting things and we tell ourselves that, we want to be super efficient and we don't have time to play and like this provides so much healing in the sense that just like when you start to see it and you're willing to sort of play with it a little bit, like you just feel better in your body. Like you unhook from that part and there's a shift that happens that you just feel it. You feel a shift in your life and in your body.
Right. And then it stays, which really convinced my efficiency part. Like, it works better. It actually lasts. So that's more efficient, right? Like, if you're spinning your wheels doing the same thing over and over, like, that doesn't feel efficient.
No,
It's
and
frustrating.
think about it. The efficiency part that's like, come on now. And it's like, okay, I might do a lot of things. And then you look at all the drama that happens in your life because you're being such a drill sergeant because you're trying to be so efficient and that, that
Right. You're trying
manager.
to get your son to potty train.
Right.
Doesn't work.
And then the amount of time you spend on the meltdowns and the drama and then the result of, how disconnected your kid doesn't feel like y'all are on the same team. You're like, well, that's inefficient.
Right.
That's sucking a ton of time up from my
Derailing.
day. Yeah.
Totally.
Okay. We both have to wrap. As we wrap, tell people how they can find you and learn more about all of these amazing, innovative approaches and the
Yeah.
conversations you're having.
Yeah, so the Innovative Therapist podcast is on all podcast players. My website's probably the best place to see all the things really that you need to get on my email list. So just go to my website and get on my email list because I'm not on social media a ton, but drshawnhondorp.com. That's ShawnHondorp.com. And on Instagram, I am psychology.of.wellness, which clearly Randy thinks I need to change, which I maybe will.
I'm just
but
saying.
I don't really
I'm
love
just
social
saying.
media, so I'm not on there that much. So it's not
Me
as high of a
neither.
priority. But
Me neither. I have not been on it much lately at all. I'm like, just listen to the podcast. Just listen
Exactly.
to the podcast.
Mm,
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you came 2 years ago and joined my group, and
me too.
you bring so much to our community, and now you're helping lots of people, and I just love our friendship and grateful for you.
Wouldn't be here at this point without you. So very grateful for you.
Power with, power with. All
Woo!
right. Everyone, everyone have a great week. Bye.
Thanks for listening today, guys. I hope you picked up some tips, tools, maybe some baby steps for creating more balance and boundaries in your life. And I just wanted to let you know, if you want to continue moving the needle forward in creating this for yourself, having a happier household, I want you to go to my website and check out mastermindparenting.com. We have 3 beginning programs, and if you need some accountability and more support, then please look for the one that would be a good fit for you. And as always, we're on all the social channels under Mastermind Parenting. On Instagram, it's mastermind_parenting. And, periodically I do pop up on different Instagram lives, Facebook lives, where I give you teaching and coaching, and I love engaging with you live to help you help your strong-willed kids so that they can feel better, because when they feel better, they do better. And I love, love, love getting to know you guys. So thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Super, super appreciative.